Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? You know, one thing is that I'm tired of the lies. Establishment media sources lie insistently about our financial conditions. And when they're finally cornered and forced to admit how bad things are, then they lie about the causes. I find that these lies are usually designed to do one of two things: overcomplicate the problem so that people give up thinking about it, or distract from the problem so that people blame a scapegoat. As for inflation, here's the bottom line. Rising prices are caused by two main drivers. The first is money creation, or too many dollars chasing too few goods. Central banks around the world have been flooding the system with fiat currency ever since the debt crisis of 2008. And the Federal Reserve within the US is the worst violator by far. We are talking about tens of trillions or more, really, in money creation, all supposedly as a means to stall or prevent a deflationary crash. By the time the pandemic and the lockdowns were initiated, the Fed dropped $8 trillion plus dollars onto the economic through stimulus measures like checks, PPP loans, and the total US money supply was already at destructive levels. Well, the stimulus was simply the straw that broke the camel's back. So if you want to know who is directly to blame for your daily expenses rising 30% or more in the span of 3 years, the first set of criminals are the central bankers. Governments and certain corporate partners are also to blame, but the central banks are the root mechanism for all inflationary movements. It's my belief, according to the evidence and all the research that I do, that the central banks have deliberately triggered a stagflationary crisis with the intent to forcefully replace cash-based economies with a new digital or cashless global economy. However, that's a discussion for another video. The other primary cause of rising prices is shortages and disruptions in key resources, including oil and energy. But keep in mind that the war in Ukraine has led to the West being cut off from large portions of the resources rich Russian markets, okay? And the war in Gaza has led to groups in the Middle East, like the Houthis, denying a multitude of cargo ships and oil tankers from traversing in the Red Sea by themselves. Each one of these events seems like a small threat to the global supply chain, but when they pile up together, the effects become detrimental. But for now, the biggest factor is rising energy prices, because this is the key resource that allows all agriculture and manufacturing to function. And every time oil prices rise, you're going to see prices in everything else rise as well. And this is the exact reason why this administration continued to dump the U.S. strategic oil resources on the market for the past couple of years. And this was their way of manipulating oil prices down in order to mitigate or to hide the greater effects of inflation. Now, that they're being pressured in order to refill those reserves and start buying at a much higher rate global oil prices and US prices in particular are spiking again. So now let's talk about food costs because they have risen about 30% or more depending on the product since the beginning of 2020. And even though CPI reports several months ago showed a slowdown in overall inflation, this does not mean that prices are going to go down anytime soon because they're not. They're going to keep rising. Um, and they're going to keep rising with each passing year, honestly. CPI is a tool for measuring the average price increases over like 80,000 products and services across a wide spectrum, okay, from like bread to oil, okay? And many of these items are not so-called like necessities, and so they dilute the actual inflation that we are seeing in everyday expenditures. If we were to actually take a look at an average of daily necessities like housing, energy, food, etc., then the CPI would read far higher. So when the media touts a lower CPI print as a sign that the economy is improving, what they usually don't mention is that the stat only represent how much higher prices are going to go. A lower CPI does not mean costs on the shelf are going to go down. Inflation is cumulative. Meanwhile, that 30% plus increase in food that we are having to deal with, that's not going to go away. It's just going to keep climbing as fast as it was. And as we've seen in the past couple of months, inflation has the ability to return just as quickly to add even more gas to the fire. Um, not long ago, I was reading an article that claimed that they could explain why there has been no respite in food prices lately. Okay. In reality, the entire piece was like a disinformation or misinformation, blaming every possible scapegoat while ignoring the real causes. Their main explanation was greedflation, or the claim that companies are overcharging on food items. In other words, blame the businesses, don't blame the Federal Reserve, and don't blame the government because they're innocent in all of this, which is a total lie. So there's no like concrete evidence to support the greedflation theory. Every business has unique expenses, unique overhead, unique industrial costs, unique quality control, unique resources costs. One cookie company, okay, let's just say Oreo or Nabisco or whatever, okay, the bottom line will be different for another cookie company like Keebler and their bottom line. With that being said, there are universal costs that directly correlate to higher prices regardless of the company, and that includes energy, labor, and core commodities. This is why people need to start to look at food as an investment, similar to the way that they might look at their 401k or their retirement plan. And if you want to mitigate costs in the future in terms of food, you will need to purchase foods with a long shelf life, like now. And if you think that inflation is a passing phase and that things will go back to normal like they were before 2020, well, then you probably won't take this concern seriously. But consider this, okay? Food storage that I bought in 2020 now costs at least 30 to 50% more to buy today in 2024, okay? Meanwhile, some of the top mainstream economists in the country were denying such thing would ever happen. And when it did happen, they said, oh, it was transitory. Remember when Janet Yellen said, oh, it's just transitory, it's fine. Well, this was also proven to be false. And now they claim that food will drop after companies are forced to go through regulations to cut prices. It is quickly becoming a necessity to invest in food security as soon as possible, because the government enforced price controls have never actually proven effective in stopping inflation. Once you remove all profit incentives, many businesses will just close up shop as if they've never even existed. And this causes the supply of goods to go down, prices to spike, and shortages to happen. Do you want to bet your future on establishment economists being right for once, or do you want to just store some food away today in the knowledge that prices are only going to exponentially go higher? It's just a question. All right, guys, I'm out of here. I will see you in the next one. You stay safe, you stay positive, you keep prepping, and as always, fear less. Ciao.